What do you get when you take people dedicated to their craft, going through leaps and bounds, acting on their plan of action even in the midst of adversity? You get a heartfelt story so organic and becoming so genuine, which forces you to be a part of their moment, joining these experiences as if you were a part of them. These are stories of people, just like you and I, reflecting from within on how they've used adversity to catapult their lifestyle, their vision, and their goals to becoming successful. Here at the Stories to Savor Network, we welcome you to this wonderful, heartfelt show entitled Reflections from Inside. So the next time you go through trials and tribulations, or having self-doubt, consider to let the stories resonate with you in hopes to inspire you to believe that you can do whatever you set your mind to do.
Before the break, we talked about the events that paved the path of motivation for Anthony Clark to bid for the Democratic seat, running on a progressive platform with the desire to improve the social and economic health of his community. Anthony, what does social and economic health mean? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to Oak Park?
I try to break it down, I think, to the smallest capacity and make those personal connections to try to build understanding. So when we talk about, social and economic health, first and foremost, think about the health of a family. If you have a family home and say the mother or father, the breadwinners, the caretakers of the family, if your mother or father gets sick and you're a child, that's going to directly impact you. That's because that's impacting the ability for the family to be overall healthy.
Right.
Not everyone in the family has to be sick for the family to be impacted. And I think if you then broaden that to a community standpoint, communities share relationships with each other, economically and socially. And what we try to focus on is how do we build bridges between communities so we understand that, because take Oak Park for an example. It's literally separated by a street from the Austin community.
Yeah.
And I think for far too long, for too many decades, communities operate as if they're on islands.
Sure.
So what happens in Austin, Oak Park doesn't have to be concerned about,
okay.
essentially. And because of that, Oak Park has families, individuals that care about their communities just the same, that want the same level of education, the same level of opportunities, but because of the by design systemic issues that have been created by the government, based upon my opinion, it's struggling, it's suffering due to food deserts, lack of job opportunity, lack of infrastructure development and investment, gun violence, so on and so forth. The list goes on. And now, how does that impact Oak Park? Sometimes it impacts Oak Park, and I don't want to say a positive way, but it impacts us because if there's a food desert in Austin, where are Austin residents going to go to buy their groceries?
Right.
So then they take their money out of their community and place it in our community.
Sure.
So then Oak Park looks at that as a positive. Oh, we have grocery stores. Our grocery stores are succeeding. We're making money. We have businesses where money is being spent. But what about the community next door? Why do they have to spend their money in Oak Park? We have to start thinking about these issues and understanding this. And I think once you break that down and identify those systemic issues and how communities should operate and work together, you start getting into, okay, what does it mean to be socially healthy and economically healthy? Because if Austin is socially and economically healthy, if we invest in what does it mean to build personal wealth and community wealth, what does it mean to invest in your own community and keep your money in your own community, it's going to benefit Oak Park in the long run.
Agreed.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we have to build those bridges. We have to recognize that when it comes to the negative issues of violence and so on and so forth, it's going to spill out. No one's immune to it. So if we ignore it, if we build a wall between us, if we act like we're on islands, we're not immune. It's eventually going to impact us. And that's what's so interesting to me, where you see Oak Park residents now concerned with carjackings, now concerned with muggings and so on and so forth. And I try to teach them, hey, they're residents just as you, care about themselves and their families just as you do, that have been experiencing this for years.
Yeah.
But because we didn't understand this, didn't pay attention to it, or didn't value it, now it's impacting you directly. And I end with, essentially, if you look out of your window, I try to use an analogy. If you look out your window and you see a neighbor in their time of need, and you just close the curtain and don't open the door, you may be fine that day. But it's inevitable. Eventually, that issue is going to come to your doorstep.
Yes.
It may not be tomorrow, it may not be the next week, it may not be the next year, but eventually it will. And if you don't go out there and help your neighbors, there's going to be no one left to help you.
Right.
So we have to get to the point where we recognize, in regards to social and economic health and advancement, we have to help individuals even when it's not directly impacting us.
Sure.
Because if we don't, it's going to eventually impact us.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we see with the declining of the middle class.
So one of the other things, you brought up a good point, one of the other things that you ran on your platform was really talking about police reform. And you stated that someone can work within a racist system and not be racist. Do you think that a potential solution to some of the trouble that we have with our police force is that we don't have police officers that are necessarily being hired to work in the communities that they're from?
Too often, and again, it's almost inherent in society, when we address it or identify an issue that we would like to address, we think we just need to throw money at it or throw more policies at it. There's no amount of money or policies in the world that could create empathy and understanding and care for an individual, essentially.
Sure.
Training I don't believe in just training.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a racist cop, and okay, this cop's racist, we're gonna give he, she, or they 2 or 3 hours of training on how to be that doesn't work. Yeah. You know, you actually have to value and be a stakeholder in the community that you're serving. And I don't believe we have that. I don't believe police departments across this nation truly focus in on community policing. It's the militarization of our police forces where we're just throwing money at them.
I would agree with that.
We're
Yeah.
investing in weapons, and so it's a reactive approach. And you have so many cops that, again, kind of relating to being a teacher, they clock in and clock out.
Right.
They're not staying after in the
Yes,
community.
yes.
They're not trying to build relationships because they don't see themselves and how it benefits themselves in the
Right.
community.
They're not from that area.
Again, it's
Yeah.
adversarial.
Yeah.
When they look at students and they look at families, they're not seeing themselves or their families or their kids.
But if they were from that community,
Exactly.
then there'd be more reason to feel like you need to
Exactly,
give back. And,
exactly, because you're
Sure.
invested.
Yeah.
You're invested and you understand the issues that exist. And even if you're not from it, if you go to that community and you try to build relationships, you could try to build greater understanding.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need.
So you talk a lot about this word that I hear called pay rent, right? So when we return, we're going to talk to Anthony about what paying rent means and how you can pay rent into your community.